You may be aware that Channel 9 News did a story on the discriminatory aspects of the invocation policy recently, and I wanted to respond to something that Mr. Ballhofer said as part of his interview. What he said was, I don't believe he's correct that our policy is discriminatory, meaning me. Why the commissioners haven't picked him, that's up to the commissioners. That's up to the commissioners have to make that decision. It's disappointing that that this commission, that Mr. Ballhofer, the city in general, doesn't seem to recognize this invocation policy as discriminatory. There are at least two ways in which it's discriminatory. One is the aspect of the invocation policy that restricts people from being on the list to be considered to those who are representatives of 501c3 organizations in some form or fashion. There's some details to that. But this particular restriction actually kicked off a few residents from the list when it was implemented, and they have not been allowed to be back on the list because they're not part of a 501c3, and that seems inherently unfair and discriminatory given that they are Winter Guard residents. The other part of that is that the reason given for the 501c3 restriction at the time was to make it easier for the city to maintain, the city manager in particular, to maintain the list. In fact, that's never really been justified well. It requires, it potentially requires additional verification that the person is actually a member of the 501c3 and representing the 501c3 explicitly, and in fact, it's not even been applied properly because, as far as I know, there are still a couple of organizations, a couple of people on the list representing organizations that are not 501c3, which means the city is, in effect, deciding which organizations can be 501c3s and which can't. So that's one part of it. The second part of this is with respect to the commissioner's selection from the list. Mr. Ballhofer said, why haven't the commissioners picked him? It's really completely irrelevant as to why. Okay, the fact is that some people have not been picked. Okay, and that speaks to unequal access to the process, and therefore a violation of the instructions handed down by the Supreme Court in Grease versus Galloway. I think that's sufficient. I'll leave it open. I am willing to discuss this further. I have mentioned this in the past. I'll mention it again. If Mr. Ballhofer would like to meet with me to get clarification on why this is a problem, I'm happy to do it, as with any commissioner or the mayor. In the meantime, I ask you to consider to change this policy so that it's fair, or just to eliminate it.